Hey, hi everyone. So I've tried a couple of times now to do this as a live. Unfortunately, Facebook is struggling today. Doesn't surprise me because what we're going to talk about today is actually the issues that we're facing with the whole universe going online and technology not being ready for us to do that. We've literally gone from 0 to 1,000 in a matter of weeks, and we're just not prepared for it. So this means we're going to have to do a few workarounds. Firstly, couldn't go live, so I'm recording the video and I am posting it for you anyway, and hopefully I can live you guys later. So what we're doing today. Now, the problems we're having now is that virtual private networks are not handling the load. We've gone from them having, 10% of their workforce using it at any one time to up to 100% of their workforce using these VPN or these, remote working situations with their technology. The NBN, our cable, all of that isn't handling the load. Now, I don't know about you guys, but yesterday my Wi-Fi was working like a dog. It was terrible, and I imagine it's just going to get worse. Don't get me started on the capacity of the NBN that we decided to install and how behind the times it is. Whole nother story. The fact is, we have what we have, and we need to find some ways to deal with and work with what we've got. So, unfortunately, this means taking our online offline. So, what are we going to do? Firstly, the first major thing must be front of mind with any decisions we make going forward. Number one, it needs to be security. We need to have this in mind in any decisions that we make, anything we implement, we need to consider our data security. So please, any advice you may take or any options that I put forward, first and foremost, make sure you have considered the security of your data. Check with your IT department if you have one. Make sure anything you do is ticked off, kosher, all good with all the people that it needs to be, your manager, IT department, whatever it has to be. Because this is a tricky time. We're doing things differently, and we need to be able to flex and pivot and change, but we need to make sure that we aren't creating any other long-term issues along the way, which I think I've said in every single video so far, because what I'm seeing is everyone is being very reactive. We're not thinking strategically, we're not thinking long-term, and we need to be. Other organizations, don't get me wrong, they have gone, right, this is an opportunity. I'm taking my whole business online and I'm in it for the long run. Great, beautiful. So security, security, security. Now, the next thing is, the problem we have is we can't use our VPN, we can't use internet all the time. So we need to be able to work offline, which means we need files to be available offline to us, whether that's on our computers that we've taken home from work, or we need them on our home PCs, not in the network that we normally work in. So I think we need to be considering things about like being able to enable files to be sent from home to from work to home and vice versa. If we are going to allow that, if we are going to allow us to email files around, they need to be encrypted or password protected. It's not 100%, obviously not as the same as keeping it all within the network, but it is a level of security if we're going to have to do that. So if you're going to email files around, make sure they are encrypted or password protected. You can even implement that if you're also going to use things like Google Drive and Dropbox. You can also implement an extra level of security on those files as well. So encryption, password protection. The other thing is some organizations are set up to do this, some not. It depends on your infrastructure, but you can add another layer of approvals for emails being sent with attachments to the email. So if you're going to send an email attachment to yourself, as an example, so you can work on the file, then your manager has to approve that email before it gets through the network. So there is an option as well. Obviously, you need to have some pretty stringent criteria if you're still allowing that to be something that a human does, not something that a system kind of controls, right? So if a human is going to make that decision of whether that's appropriate for that file to be allowed out of the network, then you need them to have some pretty strict criteria. Obviously, please don't send at any point in time your entire company's financial results. Probably not a great idea. Don't send any customer information around, obviously things like that. Be pretty practical and rational and logical with the criteria you use for allowing files to be sent to different people. But that is an option. Not everyone will be ready for that, but if you are, or your IT department can implement that, consider that as an option. Also, with logging into things, if you're going to allow people to log into applications from their home PCs, which previously they only ever logged into from within a work network, you can add two-step authentication and all sorts of things like that to the login process. You can increase the criteria for the password. So, making sure it has numbers and hashes and capitals and dots and blah, 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 all those different things. So you can change the password criteria and two-step authentication. A lot of apps these days allow you to enable that. Google also has two-step authentication now. And so do a lot of current applications, especially accounting softwares and things like that. So if you're going to allow people to log into applications, consider where you can add some extra authentication and security. So same goes with if you're going to allow the transfer of files out of the network via project management, collaboration, and file storage tools. Also, just be careful of making sure that people are being very careful with their passwords. They're using passwords, they're not saving them, all those sorts of things. Put in some rules around being able to log into applications outside of your organization on their personal computers. It's becoming more important. We're going to have to be able to do this because the remote working is not handling the load, and we need to be able to enable people to get documents, put them on their hard drives, basically, so they can work on them and then load them back up or send them back into the network. Because, like, for example, if you're working on something which is like AutoCAD, if it's tricky, really highly designed applications, Photoshop, those sorts of things, Visio, PowerPoint. If you're doing intricate work, it can be a nightmare on a network that is running like a dog, because every time you move your mouse, and you need to move your mouse just like a couple of millimeters, and it delays and it jumps over there, and it can take so long to do anything. If you're working with graphics, the load time is ridiculous. So we have to be open to options of how we're going to allow files to be in different places. Now, this is a time to also put in some new policies and principles around our data in our organization. If we're going to allow these sorts of things, we also want them to also put processes in place. Sometimes you can even add this to files. You can track the life of a file back to where it's been copied, where does the copy live. All of these sorts of things are actually possible. So let's say somebody sends themselves a file home, and you put in a policy that says once they send it back into the network, they have to delete it off their hard drive, right? I want you to be considering new policies and procedures around your data in this crazy, crazy time as well. So the other things you can do is some remote working systems and VPNs will allow some variations on being able to log fully into the network. So let's say you allow certain applications to be accessed without having to do a full login to your desktop, let's say, on the network. Maybe you let people access Outlook or some of the Microsoft Office suite as an example, so they can just work on individual files. It often means that they can work faster and the delay isn't as bad than when they have to log into their full desktop. Something to consider if your VPN or your remote working environment doesn't allow this at the moment. Check with IT, see if they can enable that sort of thing. Now, we're starting to get into a bit of a manual realm now, but I'm going to put this out there as an option because it may be your last resort. It may be the only thing you can do. If you can't get files out because your organization won't enable the ability to do that, which is perfectly acceptable. I totally understand why organizations would do that. One of the things we can do, I hate to say this, but we can do some copy pasting. So if you have to write material or work on some stuff and you have the software to allow you to do that on your personal computer, create the stuff and then email it back into the network. Because often these networks will allow emails in, but they won't let stuff out. So if you can do that, so let's say you're working on a Word document or a PowerPoint or something like that, you can create the content and then email it in and copy and paste it into the right format or template or into the document that you're working on at work, and then just fix the formatting up and things like that once you're back into the network. I hate copy paste, but if worst comes to worst, that is a workaround. Do it on your own computer, email it back into the network. Now, one of the other things is a lot of companies do allow, they've got all of their applications on phones. So you might not have your full desktop on your phone, but you might have a bunch of applications on your phone that you can use, especially email. So a lot of companies do allow email. So because it takes longer, obviously, to do stuff on the phone, what you can do is draft things on your phone and then refine it and edit it, add in images, add in graphs and things like that. When you go back into the network, save the draft, then log in and finalize the email within the network, but do the bulk of the work on your phone. And one thing I love to do is I use voice. So you can record iPhone. I'm not sure about all the Androids. I have an iPhone, but on the iPhone, you can start an email. So here, I'm starting an email, and then I press this little voicey thing here. Hang on, let me go into the thing. Press that. Hi, how are you today? It types it out for me. See? So you can actually do fast track some of your emails, use voice, so you don't have to try and like type with your little fingers on the screen. Use your voice, turns it into words. You just have to kind of edit it because it'll say some weird things like, I remember when I was working on a project and I was talking about vacant roles, and it was determined to call it bacon rolls. No matter how many times I said it with how many accents, it always changed it to bacon rolls. So you have to make sure you can go back and edit the email afterwards or the text afterwards. But it's a really quick way to get content written without having to like kind of type it on your little phone. So hopefully that will help you guys that are struggling right now with poor internet. Like obviously some of these things require internet, but for shorter periods of time. So instead of like wasting hours and hours waiting for stuff to load on the computer, you can get the file and then work on it and then suffer through those short periods of delayed productivity. So security though, paramount. Make sure any decisions you make, you're considering data security. Consider encryption, password protection, extra levels of approval, two-step authentication, allowing files to be loaded to a secure application like Dropbox or a project management tool, and then downloaded to a person's computer. They've had to log in using their password and username. So there is security on those sorts of things. And worst case, whatever you can do outside of that environment and then email it back in and do some copy and pasting, that is also a terrible but possibly necessary option. So hit me up with your questions. I am creating, so I've been asked a series of quite detailed questions about specific applications. So I'm creating some detailed videos and I will make them available. Some of them I already have because they're applications that my customers already use and that I've provided some videos to them on previously, but I'm making sure I've kind of collated them together and then I can make them available to you guys as soon as I can. But hit me with your questions and I will try and answer them as soon as I can. And have a wonderful weekend.